That's it. Thank you. That's what's it get up to me. Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome. Good morning. We have a full house right now, I think. So we could get started, although we are missing one of our panelists, very distinguished panelist, Firdosara Begum from BUILD, which is a very rising private sector institution. Very, very dynamic, I think. Works very hard, these people. So today we are really privileged and honored to have as our chief guest Dr. Sheik Moinuddin, who has left his, high position in his profession. He's an engineer and a PhD from University of California, who is, in some top position in the California Transport Caltran, including the one I always comes in mind, which is the ambitious Los Angeles, San Francisco high-speed train project. He was put in charge of that, but as we know now that, resource problems do not allow this project to go very far. So maybe he will tell us something about it. But besides that, I think he's been given a very important responsibility, that is to get things moving in the roads and highways department, which is a very critical component of Bangladesh's infrastructure. So we'll hear from him as to what the challenges are. He's left his high position and he's come to Bangladesh. It's a sort of commitment for the country, and we're hoping that there will be some. He will talk about the various responsibilities he's been given by the government and where things are. So that's all. So again, I would like to, our very go-getting young colleague, Dr. Ashikur Rahman, is actually the architect of this regular exchange that we've been having since the last month, and hopefully, it will generate a lot of discussion and debate as we go. And our dynamic executive director, Dr. Khurshid, is here. He will start with some opening remarks. This time, I just want to mention that we have a twin responsibility, which is that we have this monthly macroeconomic update to share with you. At the same time, the budget was announced this past month, and it was also, I believe, has been approved. But still, we hope that there will be some shakeup after the budget, because we have Damocles sword hanging on us, the USTR, reciprocal tariffs. 9th of July is the deadline. We still don't know what has happened to the negotiation between the government and the USTR. So we'll have to wait for that. So with that, I think I'll pass on the baton to Dr. Khurshid Alam, our Executive Director, for making some introductory remarks.
Assalamu alaikum. Morning. I welcome. It's a good group of people around, I see. Welcome to this session of this monthly. This is a monthly update, and this is done PRI and Australian High Commission. It's a partnership. So before I hand it over to Zaidi Bhai or Ashik, who takes over, few just quick, because this is the monthly economic update. Some very positive things have also. Just the other day, IMF board led us through with this, which is very critical because it will also impact long-term financing coming from outside, especially the World Bank, ADB, and others. That will open up so that's a very positive thing. This has come on the heels of a very critical reform which has just been started, the separation of policy making and implementation at the NBR. So it's not easy because, as you can see from the newspapers, there are also a lot of people, but this is the right way to go because you have to separate these two, and I hope this finally gets implemented. The other one was this floating of the exchange rate. It has held more or less pretty steady, and does not create any much of big shocks or anything. So that's the other and which gives certainty for business. And so on the heels of this, now the budget is already there. So there will be challenges. And I'm sure Sheik and Dr. Sattar, they will take us through. And then we can have a good discussion because there are, and also the inflation looks coming to terms. So these are very positive things that are there. So on the basis of that, I now hand over Ashikur or Dr. Sattar to take us through.
First part of the presentation. Okay, this is how we have divided our presentation today. Dr. Ashik, of course, will have to bear the main burden, but what I do is basically I introduce the subject, and I take care of the growth and the trade policy aspects, trade part of the update, as well as this time it's also the budget that has drawn our attention. So I will give my assessment of where the economy stands today, as well as how the budget is expected to impact the economy. So that is how we get started. So now, let's begin from the beginning. But I will start from slide number. Budget that's the first slide. Okay. By this time, I think most of you have heard about what is the budget size and what impact it's having. Just to give you a review, at least some of us didn't still have a good idea of what the budget looks like. The size, in the first place, it's a very conservative budget. For the first time, there is no incremental expenditure outlay this time. So the outlay of 7.9 trillion taka is barely equal to the last year's outlay, slightly lower actually. But in terms of percentage of GDP, it's 12.7% of GDP, which is a very conservative projection of expenditures. Typically, in the past, they used to have incremental budgets that would target something like 15% of GDP as expenditure and end up spending about 12.5%, 13% of GDP. So the expenditure, the outlay is just what is sensible. The revenue mobilization target is a bit more ambitious because this past year's revenue outcome is not worth talking about. It was very, poor, I would say. So from that point of view, this target of something like 30% growth out of last year's actual collection is a bit ambitious. But the deficit target is set at 3.6% of GDP. Again, it is not, it's very conservative. Typically, the target, welcome to Firdosara Begum. Finally, we have a full panel. So this target is usually set at about 5% of GDP. So 3.6% is a very conservative deficit target. And what might happen is if the ambitious revenue target is not met, we will have a deficit of something like 4% of GDP, which is, if you look at 25 years of past budget deficits, essentially it goes to about 4% of GDP. But let me say this is still an expansionary budget, but less expansionary than previous budgets. Any budget that is a deficit budget is an expansionary budget. So it's not a contractionary budget. That is the point we made. But it's a very prudent, I think, in terms of expenditure outlays. But it is important that the government does spend, a good amount of its resources, which have to be collected, of course, through revenue, and partly have to raise it from external sources and domestic sources. So this deficit of 3.6% that has been targeted is supposed to be financed through two, one domestic sources and the other external. Usually it used to be 40% external and 60% domestic. This time, the target is to get 44% from external. And I think the prospect looks good, getting the external resources. Thanks to the latest approval by the IMF of dispersing the last two tranches of what are equal to $1.3 billion, which will bring in some more budget support from the other multilateral institutions. So the target of 44% financing of the deficit through external resources is, I think, sensible and it's feasible. The remaining, that's where the challenge lies. That's where some of the negative macroeconomic impacts come. First off, I think the Bangladesh Bank this time is asserting its independence. So just asking the Bangladesh Bank to lend to the government to finance its revenue shortage is going to be a tough task. I think we have a governor who's holding on his bag very tough. So probably there'll be a very restrictive lending by the central bank. Any lending by the central bank to the government is basically money printing, and it's totally inflationary. So you have, given the inflation challenge, it has to be constrained. Second is they have to borrow from the banking system. That again has some negative implications. Two implications. One is that it can drive crowd out private investment. That's one problem. But even bank financing, even if it's from private banks and state banks in the economy, that also has inflationary impact. So there are two things: inflationary consequences as well as crowding out, provided deposit growth doesn't take place. If we have a substantial growth in deposits because of higher interest rates, then there would be less crowding out. So that's the thing. The other third source of domestic financing, of course, is the public. Borrowing from the public through various instruments like the treasury bills is one, and of course the Sanchoy pot. But the interest costs of those borrowing is very high. So that's the negative part. The government's interest cost is already, become something like 23-24% of, budgetary outlays or revenue, however you calculate. So that is the situation overall: conservative budget, a modest deficit target, and the impact on the economy. Basically, this time the government is not focused on very high growth. So growth is very modestly targeted at about 5.5% of GDP is the target for FY 2026 growth. Now, on that, some can argue that we didn't need growth. We have to focus on equality and on distribution. So this is a different government, so we should do that. On that, my response is that we need to have growth. Without growth, you do not have employment. If you do not have employment generation, there is not much to distribute, and employment is the source of income. So you must have growth to generate employment, to generate income, and then you also talk about the distribution of income. We have a baggage of very high income inequality, very high income Gini coefficient, but although we have high income Gini, we have a very modest and sensible consumption Gini, and that is something I'm not an expert to explain. Why the consumption Gini shows a lot of equality in terms of consumption spending, but the income Gini shows us a lot of wealth concentration. The top 10% of the population is commanding 40% of the wealth and so on. So that's where we are. So basically, I would like to cover the two things. One is the growth implications, and the other is the trade policy directions coming out of the budget. Okay, here we are. Okay, on growth, as you all know, we've been going through a rough patch since 2020 when the COVID struck. Growth was down to 3.5%, but thankfully Bangladesh did not have negative growth. So from that, we had some rough time with the 2022 supply chain disruptions globally. And since then, Bangladesh growth has been in the 4% range. So the latest final estimate of GDP growth for FY 2024, last year, is 4.2, and for FY 2025, which is the provisional estimate, comes to 4.4% of GDP. Now, let me tell you that 4% growth for Bangladesh economy is not the normal growth rate for the economy. We have moved to a higher growth trajectory since the 1990s, once we changed our policy direction from an inward-looking, closed economy model to an outward-looking, export-oriented, market-oriented economy since the 1990s. And the growth rate from there onwards has been 5% plus, 5, 6, 7. So we're not really, 4% growth is not really the normal growth trajectory for Bangladesh. So somebody might argue, how do you jump from 4% to 5.5%? Well, 5.5% is actually, we have the internal growth momentum of this economy. 5.5% growth is not a very ambitious growth rate. And if you look at our, there is at least one, indicator, one parameter which we call the incremental capital output ratio. For, if you look at the incremental capital output ratio from 2000, even from 1990 onwards up till 2020, it averages about 5, which means to say you need 5 minutes of investment to get 1 unit of growth. So in our case, 5.5% growth would require about an investment GDP ratio, GDI, gross domestic investment, of about 27.5%. Now we, in this, we have a slide which shows, yes, our investment GDP ratio has been falling for the last four years, from 32% of GDP down to 29.4%, right? And mostly because of private investment GDP ratio falling by about 2-3%. Now, public investment has still steadied, and in fact, this year, in 2024, it was still about, same as the previous year. Now, with 29% or 29.5% of GDP as gross domestic investment, getting a 5.5% growth rate is not it's not impossible to have, because the economy is still an investment-driven economy. We do need investment in order to generate growth. It's not like the developed countries where consumption drives growth. Okay, so we are still an investment driven. Of course, by the next 4 or 5 years, once the Bangladesh becomes the 9th largest consumer economy of the world, consumption spending will start, kicking in the growth rate. So for the time being, therefore, in terms of investment GDP ratio, though it has been falling, 5.5% growth target is still sensible, and it's possible. Of course, this time around, we would like to see private investment coming in. And that is where, we are hoping that, infrastructure investment will continue to drive private sector investment, private sector economic activity. And that is where government spending and government investment becomes necessary in Bangladesh. So now to run through the macroeconomic updates in the present time. First, here is a slide on what is going on with the real effective exchange rate. The real effective exchange rate is the actual indicator of export competitiveness. You don't allow the real effective exchange rate to appreciate. The index is now at 100, which shows that there is not much market pressure on the exchange rate. It is at a reasonable level. The nominal rate is 122 taka, and it's stabilized at that level, 122 taka per dollar. So, and the important thing is that the government has now adopted the flexible exchange rate regime, and that flexibility is important. Flexibility of the exchange rate ensures stabilization of balance of payments, stabilization of the current account balance, stabilization of foreign exchange reserves. So all of these are moving towards or already have reached a stable position. So that is what gives certainty to investors. So this is a message for investors that we have stabilized the external balance, with the exchange rate is stable, the foreign exchange reserves are stable and probably rising. Once we get the $1.3 billion two-tranche release from IMF, World Bank, ADB, JICA, AIIB, all of these multilaterals have been offering budget support. So we will soon see a good rise in our foreign exchange reserves shortly. And I wouldn't be surprised if that leads to some appreciation of the nominal exchange rates. From 122, it might even go down to 120 if all of those monies drop in by end of June or early in July. So that is what the exchange rate story is. The export performance, interestingly, in spite of all these, political challenges, the disruptions in the economy that we have been going through, export performance at double digits, 10% plus export growth is not something you ignore, and you think it's just, it comes by. It is a big challenge, and it shows the resilience of our export sector, of our entrepreneurs who are exporting. It tells you why Bangladesh should be more and more export-oriented, because this is a sector that generates the most employment. Right now, the manufacturing sector, for instance, we are actually manufacturing exporters. 95% of our exports are manufacturing export. And 70% of the manufacturing sector is now, manufacturing production is now export-oriented. 2/3 of employment in manufacturing is coming from the export-oriented sector. So export performance is critical, not only for employment, for also growth, because manufacturing is the one that gives us the high growth. Agriculture is typically a low growth sector, though it's a very critical sector in the economy. It grows for the long term. You can't expect agriculture growth to be more than 3%. Right now, this past year, which is 2025, and even in 24, agriculture growth was very, very, very low. So manufacturing is where we expect growth to be high, and that is what would drive higher growth. So getting 5.5% growth in FY 2026 is fine, because even the World Bank and all the others. Where is that slide? World Bank, IMF, ADB, all World Bank and IMF have projected growth rates of 5.5% and 6.5%. But ADB had a lower growth rate projection for FY 2026. So in that context, also Bangladesh's 5.5% growth rate is reasonable. Okay, let's import trends. This is where we had a bit of a problem this past year. And even for the past 2-3 years, imports have been very sluggish. When imports are sluggish, we tend to, economic activity, it's a sign that economic activity is sluggish. We tend to focus always on exports as the, driver of growth. That's not how we should look at it. Trade is the driver of growth. Trade means exports as well as import. And imports are very critical for Bangladesh. So if imports slow down, economy also slows down. So we need to keep import growing fast enough. 70% of our import bill consists of raw materials, intermediate goods, and capital goods. These are all going into the productive sector of the economy. So if there is a dearth of imports due to foreign exchange constraint or any other disruptions in the global economy, the economy suffers. So what our hope is that this coming year, now that the foreign exchange constraint has been relaxed, foreign exchange constraint is practically removed, we can afford to pay for much larger imports. So the import growth has to be stimulated in this coming year in order to not only get the 5.5% growth in FY 2026, but also get higher growth in 2027 onwards, because we need imports to invest in the economy. So that is what we are looking for in the forthcoming year. And the balance of payments and the foreign exchange reserves tell us that the coverage of import, the monthly coverage, by import coverage at 4% is just barely, okay. But we need to have at least 6 months import cover in order to have a comfortable. Okay, and even on the balance of payment side, yes, we have been moving towards balance of payment stability. Current account deficit is at below 1% of GDP. Our main focus should be not on the trade deficit, but on the current account deficit. The current account deficit is barely well below 1% of GDP right now, which is fairly sustainable. Bangladesh, for the last 25 years, has had pretty sustainable current account deficit, and sometimes in very small current account surpluses, except for the period 2022, 23, and even 24. But now the current account has resumed in its sustainable level. The overall balance of payments still shows some deficit, and that is what leads to a drawdown of foreign exchange reserves. That is where these balance of payment support that is coming from IMF and is expected to take care of. So we need to have an overall balance of payment surplus in order to accumulate reserves. So we are looking at that. The current overall deficit is very low. And so hopefully within next year, we will see some positive, some surplus in the overall balance of payments. So that would be the good sign coming. This is foreign exchange. You all know by this time that foreign exchange reserves, the gross reserves which Bangladesh Bank keeps a tab on, is at something like $27 billion. But the foreign exchange reserves under the IMF routine is just crossed $22 billion. And I would think by first week of July, we should have it at 23, 24 billion.
23 already.
Right? Okay, fine. So things are moving well. And remittance, of course, that's the other item besides exports. And I call remittance to be the export of factor services. Okay, so $30 billion is going to come in this fiscal year, which is in addition to the $50 billion of goods exports. And if you add services of another $6 billion, we've got $56 billion foreign exchange earning from exports of goods and services, plus the $30 billion. So we have about $86 billion of foreign exchange earnings coming in. And that should pay for, at least $75 to $80 billion of it. So our import payment capacity, our debt servicing, external debt servicing capacity are all look pretty good, given the strong performance of exports and remittances. This is the remittance inflow. And the interesting part is that in the last 3-4 years, our migrant departures have risen to more than 1 million. So every year, about 2.4 million youths join the workforce. Of that, what we can see is that roughly 1 million are going off as migrant workers. So that leaves about 1.4 million jobs to be created in the domestic economy. And that is the challenge for the budget, for domestic, macroeconomic policies, to generate at least 1.4 million jobs in the domestic economy. And I think that looks pretty feasible. Now, let me turn to not just the macro update, but also what the budget is doing about our trade policy directions. Now, I would describe 1/3 of the budget as actually related to trade policy. Why? Because, 30% of tax revenue actually comes from trade taxes. And trade taxes are the most distortionary taxes under the fifth. If you look at the public finance literature, they'll tell you trade taxes are most distortive, and you need to. So the budget has a big challenge. What is the big challenge? We have a very low tax GDP ratio. Everybody will tell you it's one of the lowest in the world. And at the same time, so we've got the challenge to increase our revenue mobilization on the one hand, but not by just jumping. We have a tendency to quickly slap on some tariffs, some advance tax, something on imports. And let me go to that. Where is that?
Which one, sir?
That NBR.
Which one, sir?
That's it.
Which one is it, sir?
Which one? Where I'm saying, I don't see that. I was saying that NBR is actually a hostage to trade taxes. Okay, so every time they have a revenue shortage, they're jumping and slapping some tariffs, some special. So this time they've done that on the advanced tax. This is an advanced VAT. We have a very complex trade tax structure. We have custom duties, regulatory duties, supplementary duties, VAT, and then we have advanced income tax and advanced VAT. Now, advanced income tax and advanced VAT, these are, you're not supposed to collect advanced income tax from imports, from trade taxes, or this advanced VAT. But we've gone ahead because we have not done any administrative reforms, tax reforms. So we are jumping. The easiest way to get some revenue is getting it from import. And in the process, you are really destroying the dynamism of the economy. Trade taxes really limit the dynamism of the economy. And that is where we have a lot of work to do. And I'm putting up these two tables here. What I'm calling this is the persistent protection, which undermines our export performance. That means what the export performance that we now have, 10% growth on average, we could do it 15% export growth. That is what should have happened. But we are relying on just one sector, ready-made garments. The other sectors, non-ready-made garment sectors, are subject to this protective taxes, which gives them, which discourages them from exporting, because the domestic economy, domestic highly protected economy, is so very profitable. So they give more attention to the domestic economy rather than going for exports. now these two tables, these are the general description of what is going on. Even in the current budget 2026, what do we see? The average nominal protection rate, which was 29% in 2000, is still at 28.1% in 2026. All other countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, they have reduced their NPR. Whatever that was in 2000 is down to about average of, Vietnam's average is at 8 or 9% overall. But for ASEAN, they are even 3 to 5%, even less. Now, what is this NPR made of? Average custom duty. WTO only recognizes the custom duty. They know that Bangladesh is imposing all these para-tariffs, supplementary duty, regulatory duty, so on. But we have these supplementary, as you can see, almost half of the nominal protection is coming from these para-tariffs. And when you talk of the average total trade taxes, which is TTI, it's still 56%, 55%. And if you go to the next table, how can these producers, the business sector, how can they produce and be dynamic with average input tariffs at 17%? Input tariffs in basic raw materials, intermediate goods, and capital goods. On the average, it's still 17%. It has been falling, but the average output tariffs, the tariffs we impose on the final consumer goods. And Bangladesh, 90% of our manufacturing is producing consumer goods. And that is where the average tariff is rising, not falling. So basically what we are doing is the wedge between the output tariffs and the input tariffs, which should be falling, it's actually rising. So we have a very, I would say perverse, trade policy where we are increasing protection over time. When the logic of protection is that it has to be time-bound. It has to be performance-based. You start gradually reducing your protection. But every time that argument comes up, and we've got opposition from lobbying, sectors, while we reduce custom duties over time, they have lobbied and raised these para-tariffs. So that's the story of Bangladesh's persistent protection for all these years. And so, although we call this economy, it's very dynamic, export-oriented, our export performance is highly rated, but we could be I think our export performance could be like Vietnam. There's no reason why Bangladesh export performance could not be like Vietnam. We've done so well in the garment sector. We should have done the same for the footwear sector, which is part of the apparel family. But we've got that problem, anti-export bias. The policy is to discourage exports and encourage sales in the domestic market. So that, unfortunately, nothing happened here. Now, I would like to bring the two challenges on the trade policy side, which should have been addressed in this budget. One is of course, legacy graduation. And I just mentioned that export diversification is being constrained by the protective tariffs. LDC graduation requires export diversification to be really stimulated. And the protection structure is just preventing that from happening. The budget, we hoped there would be some reforms in that direction, and that didn't happen. So the LDC graduation, where one of the top must-dos identified by the Honourable Chief Advisor was the rationalization of tariffs. But this budget doesn't give us any sense of direction. There is still the old method. You raise some custom duty, reduce some, raise some supplementary, reduce some. There is no tariff policy. That problem remains, and therefore the LDC graduation, preparation for LDC graduation has not been addressed in the budget. The second thing that ought to have been addressed, and we've got the time ticking, the 9th of July, the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs ends. So what we have seen in the budget seems to me to be a gross under response. I would say, for lack of a better word, it's a lack of response to what the USTR has pointed out. The USTR has pointed out that you have a fairly complex, non-transparent, and very high tariffs. You've got to address that. They've also pointed out that you have lots of non-tariff barriers that you need to address. But the budget, unfortunately, doesn't tell us much about their response. The 442 items that supplementary duty were reduced doesn't really go anywhere, because as you see, the NPR average is at 28.1% after the budget. It used to be 28.6%. Only about very marginal reduction. So this marginal reduction in opening up trade is not what USTR is looking for. So I think we might have a shock, because we still don't know what the government has done in terms of responding. Government, we know that is negotiating. Pakistan negotiated and they slashed tariffs. They've come up with custom duties of 4 slabs: 0, 5, 10, 15. 15 is the highest tariff they've imposed. Supplementary duties, regulatory duties have been thrown out. So it looks like they have negotiated and responded. India is also negotiating and responding through a trade agreement. They are going towards a trade agreement which will take care of some of these issues raised by the USTR. But our response has been very meager. I don't think this will, so we might come up for a show. I don't know. This is the uncertainty, I think, that we are living through. We'll find out what happens on the 9th of July. So basically, on these two counts, we're not very far. So to finish my submission, I'd like to raise an issue here about, the budget has still a big item of subsidies on agriculture, but subsidies on agriculture may be okay. I'm not going into that, but there's still huge subsidies on exports and also on remittances. These are coming out of the treasury. Okay, protection doesn't come out of the treasury. When you raise tariffs and protect domestic industries, that's a sort of indirect subsidy to the import substituting producers. But it doesn't come out of the treasury. It comes out of the pocket of the consumers. The consumers pay for this protection. Now, in this case, export subsidies and subsidies for remittance also comes from the treasury. Now, this is where I say, from May 2022 till today, the exchange rate has depreciated by about 40%. It used to be 85 taka per dollar. It is now 122 taka per dollar. 40% depreciation. This 40% depreciation means if you have not changed your tariffs, tariffs are either same, in 2023, 24, or slightly higher. What that means is your tariffs are actually 40% higher. Your import values are all up 40%. So the tariffs are up 40%. So no countermeasures has been taken in order to reduce or take care of that exchange rate shock. It should have been done, I think, gradually, if not, significantly. So that's one thing. So basically, what I see is the NPR. If you calculate the exchange rate adjustment, it's not at the TTI is in our calculation 77%, not 55% anymore. So our calculation shows. So it's a very high tariff situation. Nothing is happening there. So I think on the issue of subsidies, since 40% depreciation is the equivalent of a 40% export subsidy, both for exports and remittances, you get a 40% subsidy. This is not required anymore. This is our argument. You have a flexible exchange rate system that should take care of whatever incentive you need. So this subsidy could be saved if not right away, they could at least slash some of these subsidies to exports and to remittances. I think that is something that needs to be addressed in going forward. with those few words, basically, I would like to say that there are some good things about the budget, which is the budget is conservative. It's focused on macroeconomic stability, which we have got in a reasonable form. And once you have macroeconomic stability, growth is going to follow. And we have a reasonably good prospect of getting 5.5% plus growth rate in the coming year or two. So with that, I would like to conclude, and I pass it on to my able young colleague, Dr. Ashik,
To the answer. Thank you.
to take care of the rest, the macro issues and all that.
Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the chair and the chief guest. Our development partners, friends are here, friends from the media, friends of PRI. Thank you for taking your very valuable time out to join our MMI. So I'm going to run through the fiscal side and the monetary sector. But before we do that, we just want to show that it's not an easy time to do the budget now. It's not an easy time. We have had high inflation on a downward trend for 27 straight months. We have a very strong banking sector problem, which is receiving, I can call it governance therapy, but it's still not out of the woods. And the fiscal situation has remained very, very tight, right? So we have problems on our monetary sector and problems on our fiscal sector. And I'll start by saying that for a longest time, we said governance did not matter in Bangladesh. And until it did over the last 3 years. And core governance problems have weakened our fiscal arm, have weakened our monetary arm. And therefore, the core governance problems that has been cascading over time has undermined our macroeconomic management capacity. Because if both the arms of the macroeconomic management weakens, how do you manage it? So it's not an easy task. And on top of that, we have faced global shocks, which has amplified our poverty, which has created the problem of unemployment, and which has also amplified inequality. So it's not a very easy time to do the budget. So having said that, and I don't want to over repeat, the budget on the surface does not look incremental, because if you compare the budget with the budget, it's actually a downward revision. But if you compare with actual revenue performance of this year, it is ambitious, because actual revenue performance this year has been very poor. If you really look at it, our revenue performance target now for next year is around 5 lakh crore, 500 billion taka, whereas actual revenue performance till May has been 322 billion taka, which means there's a possible shortfall of 140 billion for this month of June. So even if we do wonderful, right, even if we do like 70 billion in this current month, the ambition is to get a 30% growth, which is unheard of in Bangladeshi history in last 15 years. 30% revenue growth has never been achieved in Bangladesh history. And this fiscal problem, this has become the Achilles heel of our macroeconomic management. এই রাজস্ব সমস্যাটা আমাদের অর্থনীতির একদম মেরুদণ্ডটাকে দুর্বল করে দিয়েছে. If you look at the operating expenditure, throughout all our life, at least our revenue covered our operating expenditure. অর্থাৎ রাজস্ব আমাদের ওয়েজ বিল, আমাদের সাবসিডি বিল, আমাদের ইন্টারেস্ট রেট বিল কভার করতো. For the first time, আপনারা রেড ডটটা দেখবেন, বর্তমান fiscal year-এ আমাদের রাজস্ব is not covering our operating expenditure. অর্থাৎ আমরা কিছুটা বলা যেতে পারে যে আমরা ঋণ নিয়ে এখন বেতন দিচ্ছি, ঋণ নিয়ে আমরা সাবসিডি দিচ্ছি, এবং ঋণ নিয়ে আমরা আপনার ইন্টারেস্ট পেমেন্ট করছি কিছুটা, রাইট? আমাদের রাজস্ব is not there. And this is alarming, because এই ট্রেন্ডটা আমাদের ভাঙতে হবে. এই ট্রেন্ডটা না ভাঙতে পারলে আমাদের যেই সাইকেলটা তৈরি হবে, এই ডেট এবং এই আপনার ডেট সাইকেলটা তৈরি হবে, ইট উইল অ্যাম্পলিফাই, বিকজ এইটা কি হচ্ছে, আমরা বেসিকলি ব্যাংকিং সেক্টর এবং ট্রেজারি বিল থেকে এটা ফাইন্যান্স করছি 13%, 12% লোন নিয়ে, এবং এইটা আমাদের ইন্টারেস্ট রেট শেয়ার অফ দি অপারেটিং এক্সপেন্ডিচার আমাদের বাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছে। আমাদের আরেকটা বড় ডাইমেনশন অফ আওয়ার ফিস্কাল প্রবলেম, একদিকে রাজস্ব ঘাটতি, আরেকদিকে রাজস্বর স্ট্রাকচার, অর্থাৎ আমার রেভিনিউ স্ট্রাকচার। আপনার যদি দেখেন আমাদের রেভিনিউ স্ট্রাকচারের 2/3 ইজ ইনডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সেস, রাইট, 1/3 ইজ ডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সেস, এবং এইটুকু কোয়ালিফাই বলে দিতে হবে ওই 1/3 এর একটা অংশ, ইনকাম ট্যাক্সের একটা অংশ রিগ্রেসিভ ভাবে আদায় করা হচ্ছে ইম্পোর্টের উপর থেকে। সো আপনি যদি সত্যিভাবে ডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সেস দেখেন তাহলে ডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সের মাত্রা আরো কমবে। তো আপনি যদি একটা অ্যাডভান্স দেশের তাকান, যে কোনো অ্যাডভান্স দেশ, মালয়েশিয়া, থাইল্যান্ড, এনি অ্যাডভান্স দেশ, আমাদের থেকে তুলনামূলক অ্যাডভান্স দেশ, আই এম নট টকিং অ্যাবাউট ইউরোপ, আপনি দেখবেন এই রেশিওটা ডাইরেক্ট অপোজিট। ডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সেস হচ্ছে 70%, 75%, ইনডাইরেক্ট ট্যাক্সেস সাচ এস ভ্যাট and others is হয়তো 20%, বাট আমাদের এই রেশিওটা এই বাজেটে এই স্ট্রাকচারাল চেঞ্জে হাত দেওয়া হয়নি, এবং এটাই আমরা দেখলাম যে এই স্ট্রাকচারাল অর্থাৎ রিগ্রেসিভ যে স্ট্রাকচারাল ডাইমেনশনটা আছে, দ্যাট রিগ্রেসিভ স্ট্রাকচার has prevailed. So first there's a fiscal space problem and then there is a fiscal structure problem. আমাদের আরেকটা মিজান ভাই, হ্যাঁ সরি, আমাদের আরেকটা দুর্বলতা দেখলাম যে রাজস্ব আদায়ের জায়গা থেকে সরে গিয়ে রাজস্ব খরচের জায়গাটা। আমরা যদি গত 15 বছরের অ্যাভারেজ দেখি, এডিপি ইমপ্লিমেন্টেশন হার ওয়ান অফ দ্য লোয়েস্ট ইন লাস্ট 15 years। আমরা বারবার এটা নিয়ে কেন হচ্ছে, এটা কেন এই ধরনের আমাদের ক্যাপাসিটি কমছে, এইটা নিয়ে আমরা কথা বলে যাচ্ছি, কিন্তু এই জায়গায় আমরা সাফল্য সেই তুলনায় আনতে পারছিলাম না। আমরা দেখেছি বাংলাদেশের এক সময় এডিপি ইমপ্লিমেন্টেশন হার 97% পর্যন্ত হয়েছিল, সেখান থেকে কমতে কমতে 70-তে এসেছে, এখন 70-র নিচে চলে গিয়েছে, এবার হয়তো 60-65 হবে। So this is alarming and we need to think deeply about correcting this downward trend. এই ডাউনওয়ার্ড ট্রেন্ডটা আমাদের কারেক্ট হচ্ছে না। আমাদের এডিপির যদি আপনি অ্যালোকেশনও দেখেন, অ্যালোকেশনটাও আমাদের ওই আগের প্যাটার্নটাই ফলো করছে। আমরা স্টেবিলিটিকে প্রাধান্য দিচ্ছি, we are focusing on stability, that's fine, and we need to focus on stability. For some reason আমাদের এই ফায়ার ফাইটিং এপিসোডটা একটু লম্বা হয়ে গিয়েছে। অনেক দেশের 22-এর সমস্যা থেকে, কোভিডের সমস্যা থেকে খুব তাড়াতাড়ি বের হয়ে গিয়েছে, কিন্তু ফর সাম রিজন 22-এর সমস্যা, কোভিডের সমস্যা, তারপর আমাদের যে গভর্নেন্স চ্যালেঞ্জ, আমরা কিন্তু এই 5 বছর ধরে আমরা একটা ফায়ার ফাইটিং এপিসোডে আছি। উই আর ইন দিস ফায়ার ফাইটিং এপিসোড। আমাদের একটা স্ট্র্যাটেজি বের করতে হবে আমরা কিভাবে এই ফায়ার ফাইটিং এপিসোড থেকে বের হয়ে আমরা রিসার্জেন্স এবং ইকুইটির দিকে তাকাতে পারবো। কারণ সোশ্যাল স্পেন্ডিং আপনি যদি আমাদের দেখেন, আমাদের সোশ্যাল স্পেন্ডিং, সোশ্যাল সেক্টর স্পেন্ডিং, health spending, education spending, one of the lowest in the world. Now, it is not rocket science for me to say that a knowledge-based economy, যেটা world হতে যাচ্ছে with 4 AI and fourth industrial revolution, সেই জায়গায় আপনি health and education কে পিছিয়ে রেখে আপনি শুধু ক্যাপিটাল অ্যাকুমুলেশনের মাধ্যমে আমার মনে হয় না সেটা অর্জন করা সম্ভব। সো আমরা যদি বাজেট ডেফিসিট দেখি, ইয়েস বাজেট ডেফিসিট কমেছে, আমরা ওই স্টেবিলিটিকে প্রাধান্য দিচ্ছি, এবং একটা গুড সাইড হচ্ছে লাস্ট 1-2 বছর ধরে আমরা দেখছি যে রাজস্ব খাত এবং মনিটারি মুদ্রানীতি এবং রাজস্ব নীতি, মনিটারি পলিসি অ্যান্ড ফিস্কাল পলিসির মধ্যে আমরা একটা অ্যালাইনমেন্ট দেখছি। সো আগে কখনো কখনো দেখা যেত যে কন্ট্রাকশনারি মনিটারি পলিসির সাথে এক্সপ্যানশনারি ফিস্কাল পলিসি এসে পড়তো, অ্যান্ড দ্যাট ডিড নট মেক এনি সেন্স। বাট আমরা দেখছি যে স্টেবিলিটির কারণে এখন আমরা কন্ট্রাকশনারি মনিটারি পলিসি is complemented with contractionary fiscal policy, which is a good side in the overall macro structure. আমরা যদি ফরেন ডেট পেমেন্ট কুইকলি দেখি, ওইখানে এখনো ভয়ের কিছু নেই, বাট রিয়েল কনসার্নটা হচ্ছে ডোমেস্টিক ডেট পেমেন্ট, বিকজ আমরা যেভাবে ট্রেজারি বিল দিয়ে টাকা উঠাচ্ছি এবং রাজস্ব উঠাতে পারছি না, ইন্টারেস্ট রেট ইজ টেকিং আ লট অফ পোর্শন of the fiscal arena. আমরা যদি কুইকলি মনিটারি সেক্টরটা দেখি, I think মনিটারি স্পেসে আমরা কিছু সাফল্য দেখেছি। আমাদের ইনফ্লেশন গত 27 মাস ধরে is high, 9% উপরে, and that has hurt the purchasing power of the people. But it is on a downward trend, and Bangladesh Bank is continuing with the contractionary monetary policy. And I am hopeful within the next 3-4 months. I kind of agree with Bangladesh Bank that inflation will come down over the next 3-4 months. Because the policy rate for the last 3 months have been higher than the inflation rate. So it's having a bite on inflation taming, which is always a good thing. Amader liquidity scenario, আপনি যদি ব্যাংকিং লেন্ডিং রেটের একটা ইন্টারেস্টিং ডাইমেনশন আমি দেখাতে চাই, আমাদের যে লেন্ডিং রেট এন্ড ডিপোজিট রেটের মধ্যে যে ওয়েজটা, এটা কিন্তু একটু বেড়েছে। হ্যাঁ, এটা বাড়ার পিছনের কারণটা হচ্ছে যে এখন কিন্তু ব্যাংকস হ্যাভ টু রেকগনাইজ দ্য এনপিএল দ্যাট দে ওয়ার হাইডিং ইন দ্য বুকস। যেহেতু এখন অ্যাকাউন্টিং স্ট্যান্ডার্ডের উপরে একটা ফোকাস এসেছে, দে হ্যাভ টু অ্যাকনলেজ দ্য ব্যাড লোনস দ্যাট দে হ্যাভ গিভেন। এবং এই ব্যাড লোনটা দেওয়ার কারণে আমি অনেকগুলো ব্যাংকারদের সাথে কথা বলে অনেকটা বুঝতে পেরেছি। সরি, এটা টেকনোলজিক্যাল ইস্যু হচ্ছে আমাদের এখানে। আই হ্যাভ টু বি লাউড। Okay, so now that they have to acknowledge the fact that there is an NPL in their book, they have to keep interest rate high and deposit rate low, যে কারণে এই ওয়েজটা অনেকটা বাড়ছে। বাট আমাদের ডিপোজিট গ্রোথ এবং ক্রেডিট গ্রোথে একটা পজিটিভ টিক আছে, which is লাস্ট এপ্রিল পর্যন্ত আমরা যেটা দেখেছি। এবং এনপিএল এর স্টোরিটা, I want to again stress that with all my friends in the media. আমরা বারবার বলছি এনপিএল গত 6 মাসে এত বেড়েছে না, এনপিএল বাড়াই ছিল, আমরা উইন্ডো ড্রেসিংটা সরাচ্ছি। বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক যে অ্যাসেট কোয়ালিটি রিভিউ AQRটা 6টা ব্যাংকের করেছে এবং বাকি ব্যাংকগুলোর করবে, বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক ওপেনলি বলছে যে AQR করার পরে, কমপ্লিট করার পরে NPL can be as high as 30%, অর্থাৎ 6 ট্রিলিয়ন টাকা, রাইট? বিকজ আমরা উইন্ডো ড্রেসিং দিয়ে, অ্যাকাউন্টিং ক্যামোফ্ল্যাশ দিয়ে আমরা এই প্রবলেমটাকে হাইড করে রেখেছিলাম। নাও we are getting to know the size of the problem, এবং you need to know the size of the problem to determine the medicine. এবং এই জায়গায় আমি একটু বলে রাখি, একটা কনসার্ন আছে যেটা স্যার একটু টাচ করেছে, 6 লাখ কোটি টাকা এনপিএল হয়তো শেষ হিসাবে দাঁড়াবে, কিন্তু তখন এই টাকাটা আমরা কিভাবে অ্যাড্রেস করবো, এই গ্যাপটা আমরা কিভাবে অ্যাড্রেস করবো? এখানে ফিস্কাল সাইডের ভূমিকা রাখতে হবে। আপনি হয়তো কিছুটা ফরেন ইনভেস্টমেন্ট আনতে পারবেন ব্যাংকিং সেক্টরে, আপনি তো সেন্ট্রাল ব্যাংক টাকা ছাপিয়ে এটা বাঁচাতে পারবে না। তাহলে ফিস্কাল সাইড থেকে যদি সাপোর্ট না আসে, এই বাজেটে কিন্তু রিক্যাপিটালাইজেশনের ব্যাপারে কিচ্ছু বলা নেই, ব্যাংক রিক্যাপিটালাইজেশনের ব্যাপারে কোনো কথা বলা নেই। অর্থাৎ there is an assumption যে বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক সমাধানটা বের করবে, বাট বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক কতটুকু সমাধান বের করতে পারবে উইদাউট এনি সাপোর্ট ফ্রম দি ফিস্কাল সাইড? সো এই জায়গাটায় আমি বলবো দ্য গভর্নমেন্টকে চিন্তা করতে হবে, বিকজ এই 6 লাখ কোটি টাকা আমরা কিভাবে ন্যাভিগেট করব in the coming 2-3 years is very important. I hand over to you, sir, to say that.
The next, you want me to say some concluding
আপনার যে স্পেশাল ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার আর এটা।
Okay. So since we have our chief guest who has been given the special assignment to look after and get some action in one of the largest infrastructure sector, which is roads and highways, I think that budget allocation, in terms of budget allocation, I think roads and highways receive one of the highest allocations also. So our expectation is also very high in terms of implementation. And the important thing is it drives private investment. The expenditures on public infrastructure drives private investment, private economic activity. So that is why we need to see real implementation. This time, the fluff is gone. So, you can have a larger budget, but if you've got, a big chunk of that allocation going to mega corruption. So the actual impact on the economy is that much lower. So this time although this is a conservative budget, allocations are very restrained. I think it's going to go to the right places, and the outcome should be also very positive. So what I've done here is we're going to leave the actual story with our chief guest. What we have shown here is that what are the top infrastructure projects in the current state, and we noticed that of the top 10, 7 are actually infrastructure projects, among which we have, I think, the Dhaka East-West Expressway, Dhaka Metro Rail, and the Ashikur Expressway. So these are, among the top 10 infrastructure projects, and we would like to hear from you as to what is going on. What do you see? What is your perspective, your insights now about the challenges in this sector, and how the government is approaching the implementation? But before I go to the chief guest, we have 2 distinguished panelists who would like to hear about the state, the macro situation, as well as your comments on the and the budget. If you have any comments on the budget, you're welcome.
Please.
But on the macro update is same.
Thank you. Well, thank you so very much. Actually, I have enjoyed the presentation of Dr. Zaidi Sattar, always, and definitely his presentation is also same. I think it will be acknowledged by all the participants and those who have heard his presentation. And also Dr. Ashikur Rahman, very nice presentation. And you have given almost the total structure, even though we are having lots of discussion on budget right at the moment, still it has refreshed our mind. So thank you so very much, but I will try to be very brief and to the context. During the presentation of Dr. Zaidi Sattar, he has mentioned about the 2 directions of his presentation. One is both implementation. And the second one is the trade policy direction.
Okay.
The second one is the trade policy direction. So the first one, that is the growth in direction, I fully agree with the presentation made by Dr. Sattar and Dr. But for the trade policy direction, I have some observations, because I'm representing the private sector at Mr. Rizwan Rahman. Yeah. One time and so I think we have with us the chief guest, Dr. Sheik Moinuddin, and the classic Clinton Fulfill, 55 commissioner. I think I have been meeting you frequently.
Yes.
Yesterday also, we had in a separate meeting. Okay, the first point I would like to mention here is the point, the MMI. And this is an excellent issue. I think I would like to congratulate Policy Research Institute for taking such an important initiative. However, when I was going through the presentation, thanks the PRI officials that they have shared the presentation earlier, and I had an opportunity to go through just quick, had a quick glance. I just wanted to see or wanted to know, even if I have missed the first part of the presentation, what could be the main objectives, because the monthly macroeconomic insights, getting the monthly insights is very, very important for the country, because we are having statistics from different statistical institutions. Things are always 1 year, sometimes 6 months, or sometimes they could be ahead of our areas. So in that respect, I think monthly macroeconomic index insights will be very helpful for us. In that respect, the data set that you are going to use, I believe that this is the data set given by the government, or you would like to generate it somewhere, because in Bangladesh, data set is very, very important issues, and sometimes we do not have enough faith on the data set produced by the government. So that's why I just wanted to raise this issue, because in the developed countries, data set and the databases are very, very important, and this is working as one of the main raw material for preparing this type of surveys, reports, and etc. But we are very, very much behind in that respect. Always while we are doing for any research, we are definitely always facing the deficit of data. So this is one point that I would like to mention here or add here. So in future, I think you would definitely be willing to address this issue. This is one point. And the second point is very important. You have referred in your presentation regarding the PMI. This has been doing by one of the leading chamber in the country, but they are also doing a very good, I think, analysis in that respect. And we have seen that the PMI in April declined, and this is very true. That we have seen that manufacturing sector is not doing very good. And a manufacturing, construction, and the services sector, I think, are expanding at a rate. In that respect, you have mentioned very rightly as one of the, I think, government representatives here, the prolonged public holidays and supply disruption, definitely. So we have seen that this year for the first 10 days, Eid holidays, and sometimes some of the private sector people was telling to us that, for us it is very difficult. So you have rightly mentioned the reason, one of the reasons, definitely, there might be some more reasons in that respect. Unemployment issues, this has been great, and the two presentation you have made very nice, very, very, very correctly, that close to 4.60% in the October-December quarter of up from 3.95% earlier, based on the ICLS by BPS. So in that respect, I believe that the reliable data set for the PMI and MMI would increase the acceptance by the users like us. So this is one thing. In your presentation, you have very rightly referred about the toy industries. And it is mentioned that 77% growth in that sector. However, what I believe, and I have had some ideas.
That's 77,
but
very high.
77 million, you have mentioned.
Yeah, $77 million.
For 15.23 million of 2017, it increased to 77 million in 2023. I know about this sector, and it has been exported to 88 countries. Whatever I understand, and I have an experience of working with the toy industries, because we are working very closely with the Bangladesh plastic industry sector. The toys that has been produced and exported from our country is not that much high quality. It's true. And almost 80 to 90% of the total components are imported. And the last point I would like to add here is that, and it has also been exported to USA. And I'm a bit surprised.
Growing at 30-40%.
Yes, I have seen that toys from Bangladesh is exported to USA. And interestingly, as you have also mentioned about the reciprocal tariff, so there is a point raised by US government that any raw material imported from China, if can be used in the export product, that might have faced any restriction in the while exporting to US. So in that respect, I believe that toys industries, even though showing a significant, I think, go ahead, and it's a very interesting that we are exporting toys to 77 countries, it is true, but the emerging challenges we need to take care of it. So this is one thing, and you have also very rightly mentioned about the 5 non-RMG sectors, which has got tremendous potential. this is very true. I think we need to take care of this issue. Again, for these issues, that European Green Deal issues are coming up, ESG issues are coming up. So while preparing for the non-RMG sector export, even though it has got tremendous potential, we need to take care and prepare our exporter economy. So these are some of the points that I want to, I think, add for your MMI
Thank you.
Exercise.
Yeah.
Now coming to the trade policy issues, there are, I think, 5 challenges that have been mentioned in your paper. And there are in the budget supplementary to here 42 products have been reduced. Not only that, 100 products for which has been totally, I think, eliminated. 9 products has got lots of. I think in the budget there are a number of changes and challenges. Changes have been made in case of regulatory duty, supplementary duty, advanced tax, ATB, EIP, etc. So definitely has got some implication for the industry because government will definitely try to look into the issues of other sources from where they can, I think, bring the more revenue or collect more revenue. So in that respect, I believe that the budget that has been placed, it has got 3 specific challenges. One is implementation challenge, though that has been already announced. It will be some of the cases, implementation challenges will be there. Number 2 is the LDC graduation versus trade facilitation, which is very, very much required for the private sector development. And the third point is the policy inconsistencies and dexterity. So let me try to add some of the points in these 3 aspects. Number 1 is the, in case of implementation challenges, you have also mentioned, I agree, that the target of 6.5% implementation challenge could be difficult to meet in the near future because there are high food prices and we have seen that subsidy cut backlash risks will be there. So these are some of the issues may not be able to achieve this inflation rate at 6.55% in the next coming fiscal. Then the fiscal deficit that has been announced at 3.6% of GDP. Overall reliance of the borrowing from banking, that it is the amount is about 46%. This is, you have mentioned it very rightly, both of you have mentioned it very rightly. This will be another risk and the implementation challenges will be difficult. Social protection that has been raised by several economists and you have also mentioned 17% of the budget that is this has got some error and covers it definitely. Manufacturing sector I would like to highlight in that respect because in the economic census you have seen that 2024 just has been released. Manufacturing sector growth has shown 8.9%, which was 11.12% in the earlier census, that is in the 2013 census. And not only that, in the earlier census, our growth in the manufacturing sector was much higher, 12.42%. However, I think the number of industries has been increased a lot. So growth might be reduced, but I think that the manufacturing sector expanded. There is no doubt about it. Let me just allow to tell some of the points here. In the industrial policy of Bangladesh, 115 sector has been highlighted. Several sectors, priority sectors, specialized sectors, export sectors, etc. Is it possible for industrial policy to look into the issues of 115 industrial sector? I think there is a time to think for these issues that we need to prioritize 5 to 6 sector maximum so that we can develop, because industrial policy or the Ministry of Industries do not have that much of capability to nurture of these 117 sectors at a time. And I would also like to refer some of the changes, global changes that has been coming up because of the I think, different types of war, geopolitical situation, etc., etc. What we have seen is that some of the developed countries, or most of the developed countries, have been opted for the import substitution, I think, strategies. This is one thing. Even India has gone for PLI, production-linked incentives. They have gone for this. America, we have seen that America first. China, made in China. Even if Indonesia, they have opted for downstreaming. The countries have taken up their strategies in their own way, taking care of the changes in the global system. And deglobalization, we have seen the changing scenario towards deglobalization. So we also need to frame out our policies, industrial policies specifically, in that respect, so that we can integrate our macroeconomic policy and the industrial policies in alignment, so that we can see the changes or increase in the manufacturing sector in future. Otherwise, you know that employment and investment issues are stagnant as well. I would like to, I think, elaborate here. High interest rate very much impacting the private sector. Political uncertainty. That's why the investment is not coming up. ADP cards, you have already mentioned, that slashed 14% year on year is one of the, I think, important issues. Executional allocation, just 1.7%. It's much lower than the UNESCO benchmark. Monetary coordination, we haven't seen, but that has started. That is banking reform, banking resolution ordinance 2025, I have seen. I think, and public expenditure, which is by 16,000 crore taka, you have already mentioned. Credit growth for the private sector declining. Tax GDP ratio, you have already mentioned that 53,000, I think, was. And I believe in the next coming years, next coming fiscal, this will be if proper, I think, correction measures are not taken. In the budget, it has been announced the operation of the one-stop service center and Bangladesh single window. These are very good initiatives. And there is an announcement of the 100 crore taka for the startup. We would like to see the implementation of these. So that's why I'm telling you that the budget has got some number of implementation challenges. We are listening this national single window implementation since long, but if it is not in that manner to facilitate the private sector to get their services, support services instantly, this would definitely not be helpful for them and increase the manufacturing sector growth in future. So, and with the debt servicing by 15.5%, while I think health, education, and agricultural allocation in total 21%. Definitely, there is a tremendous risk as well. Now, just coming to the point, LDC graduation and the trade facilitation. What we have found that even though there are a number of steps have been taken to step into the situation of the LDC graduation, however, the trade facilitation issues have not been taken care appropriately. We have seen that the minimum import prices have been reduced totally, supplementary duty, non-tax revenue. There is a plan that non-tax revenue usually in future it will be included. There is a plan by the government that NTR, that is the fees for the licenses, government licenses are much lower. But I think private sector people will tell that how much the actual cost, what has been written in the book, maybe 200 taka per license, but how much it costs to take it practically. So these are some of the issues. And let me just give you one example. Say our port, where customs for releasing a consignment takes 11 days, 11 point some days for the airport, container it takes 7 days or something like that. In comparison, Sri Lanka, it takes 1 to 5 days, 1 to 3 days. And Singapore, it is 1 to 6 days. How the private sector will be competitive if these are the situation of the port? Let me just give you another example.
I think the time till
I'll finish it. There is digital deficits also. For a single, I think, a trader, for a single consignment, he needs 55 signature, 22 document, 110 steps within 38 hours for releasing a consignment. We have taken an example of Honourable. Time release studies, and for a bond renewal, it takes 45 to 50 days for a bond renewal. Why it will take 45 to 50 days? How private sector will be competitive if these are the trade facilitation issues? So in case of trade facilitation, I would like to add that risk management, I think authorized economic operator, advanced ruling, these are some of the issues very rightly and clearly mentioned, and we have signed this agreement since long. So these are issues I believe the government need to take these issues. Policy inconsistencies are there. There are lots. SMEs interests have not been taken carefully. There are lots of issues. E-commerce are expanding in our country. Very small entrepreneurs are coming up in that sector. For the first time in the budget, the VAT on this sector has been increased from 7.5% to 15%. Lots of connecting activities are coming up and going on. So in that respect, how the SMEs will survive? So these are some of these.
Let
me just finish with the first and last point. I think, let me just conclude it. There are theoretical mismatch. You have rightly mentioned it. I would like to add.
Our distinguished panelists,
budget prioritizes short-term stabilization issues, definitely, but structural transformation issues have not been taken care fully. So there are low growth, high inflation and unemployment issues are there. You have explained it, so I do not like to, explain it further. Last point, I would like to finish with a quote from Joseph Stiglitz. You cannot deflate your way to growth with 26% youth unemployment. This is a textbook policy incoherence. So with this 26% unemployment, it's very difficult to go ahead or to move ahead.
Thank you. With Joseph Stiglitz' words, that would be a good conclusion. May I now invite another distinguished panelist, former President, thank you. Former President of the Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Mr. Rizwanur Rahman. Please share your views, insights.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chief Guest.
I think we can hear you.
I'll try and speak loud enough.
Right, you're loud. You're pretty loud. Thank you.
I don't know what else we're left to discuss. I will try to stay very brief. From what I have gone through, let me just point out the major concerns of the private sector, the budget, and what should have been done and what hasn't been addressed. I'll be very brief. One thing is, if I'm not mistaken, in May 2025, inflation has been flagged at 10% or slightly more than that.
9%.
Nine issues.
Up to December 2024, NPL itself was close to $35 billion. In terms of dollars, I said, because, I just wanted to address in dollars, you said 6 lakh crores, but I said December 24. You have a 21-year low private sector credit growth. Again, this is not consequential to what happened, because when you compare the last 20 years, even though we have never achieved the private sector credit growth target in general, regardless of whether it is in the last 2 years or the last 15 years or so on, country is growing bigger. There has been shortfalls. There has been a lot of job loss from July to December. Many of them for various reasons. Some companies just vanished out of thin air. Some factories were burned down. Some, whatever the reason was, there was nearly 2 million job loss. Revenue target has been set 8.8% higher this year. This is the other side of the budget. And we have over 2 trillion taka of deficit, budget deficit. And on top of all this, to sweeten the deal, we have a 42% depreciation of the taka. This is just, a businessman's, not economic, perspective. That's how we analyze. And I said, sweeten the deal. And then the cherry on top was a hike in the corporate taxes, raised to 27% for non-listed companies. Of course, because we have a lot of listed companies in this country, about a few hundred out there, but there's a few million businessmen out there. These are what we have noticed from this year's. Now, this goes to show that we don't have much of a macroeconomic concern. This is what I understand. If there was a macroeconomic concern, we want an explanation of how you are going to distribute it. NPL. Today is 26th of June. I think you will see a shocking rise after 30th of June. It hasn't come to the light yet, but there are good businesses out there who are also struggling. Let's not always talk about the bad businesses or people who have laundered money. That's the difference. They are not businessmen. They are corrupt individuals. When we speak about businesses, small or large. Right now, there is a couple of hundred corporate companies who spend until midnight in the central bank negotiating their terms, which the Bangladesh Bank has nicely pointed out. We're not going to give a blanket coverage to everyone. We're going to each one by one call you to hear your problems. Last I know, a gentleman who finished his meeting at 11:30 at night 2-3 days ago. And good outcome of it. But these are people who are being called into Bangladesh Bank because they're applying. But there needs to be a blanket coverage for CMSMEs, which doesn't exist. Now, one of the reasons why they are going bad loans. For example, I borrowed at 9%, now I'm paying at 15%. Why am I paying this 5-6% gap? Because I did not launder money, I did not default money. আমি তো অর্থ পাচার করিনি আমাকে কেন এই দায়টা নিতে হবে but yes ব্যবসায়ী সমাজকে একসাথে দায়টা নিতে হবে including the government. This interim government, when they took oath, they took responsibilities of the previous mistakes also, because it is all our shared responsibility. Again, which I mentioned, the total lack of concern from the CMSME perspective. Our access to finance was always a problem. It's nothing new. It still remains a problem. This is where I would think the central bank can play a pivotal role. All this documentation that you require, these are small businesses. When I say CMSME, let's stick to the cottage and small. The definition should be separated. Mediums are fairly large industries. The cottage and small industries should have a separate policy. There is a policy by the central bank. What happens is they say that SMEs should have 25% of your total disbursements. As soon as you add the word M, that 25% goes to that M. The CM, the cottage and micro does not get anything out of it. You're going to ask them for 3 years audited reports. They don't understand what an audited report is. Now, let me interject by saying we always speak about the large employers who are the export sector and so on, but they are not the actual large employers. 85% of industrial employment comes from cottage and micro industries. Industrial employment, because what we see is a 50,000 worker factory. Oh, wow, fantastic. But there is hundreds and thousands of 20 worker factories, light engineering, for example. If you go to the light engineering area, there's hundreds and thousands of companies that employ 20 workers, 15 workers. On small furniture units, are they not industries? Do they not contribute? They do, but their voices usually are unheard. We see very little attempt to raise the tax net as opposed to the tax revenue. Yeah, they have done some documentation. You have to submit your tax forms, your PSRs, your proof of submission returns for various services you want to take from the government. But when I pay my taxes, why does a taxman get a commission on it? What is this? I'm going to repeat the word, Oishom. Because this government is standing on Oishom Mobile. What is this? I'm going to use the word nonsense. I am paying taxes, which I owe to the government. You are rewarding a taxman? And you don't think that taxman gets rewarded underhand also? So this difference, a few days ago, let me again reiterate, the finance advisor said, the businessmen should pay Joktik Kor dite pabe. Are you saying that we don't pay Joktik Kor, like relevant taxes? We are one of the highest taxed countries in South Asia. On Asian average, we are very high. International average, of course, we're very high. If you compare to our neighbors, whether it's India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, wherever, we are one of the highest. We do pay one of the highest taxes. You're talking about tax evasion or, not declaring your assets. That's a different story, but don't generalize. There are people out there, because of these kind of issues, people don't want to register themselves as a taxpayer. They feel scared. They feel scared to pay taxes. Literally what you have done now, you have reduced the slab in the personal income tax from 5%, you move it to 10%. Think about all your junior staff who fall on that slab. Their income tax has gone up. You have raised the tax from turnover tax from 0.5% to 1%. You're thinking, 0.5% was you have no idea what a big deal that is. People are going to start hiding their wealth. You're pushing them to. Now, if you want to charge turnover tax or AIT 10%, I will endorse you, but guarantee me, give me a statement that is full and final. It is not full and final. It never gets settled afterwards. What happens is we get audited all the time. And audited means, make some agreement behind the door because there is no accountability. Why? Because there is no automation. The automation system of the integrated VAT administration system, which was a total failure in 2023, they launched some software and the manufacturers vanished. But we can still do it. We can engage our donor agencies to be a part of it. In fact, World Bank was the one who sponsored it, but we failed to do it. Why? This opposition comes from the National Board of Revenue, because you know that they will be in trouble because they have a lot of access to the shadow economy, which they're failing to receive. Now, LDC graduation. I'm yet to meet another businessman who's ready. When I say another, I'm not ready. I don't think a single businessman supports LDC graduation. I know this government is working hard on it. Initially, the government said we were trapped to graduate to LDC. Several advisors and ministers said, we have been put in this position with fake data. Why are we following through? We are in a state of concern or a mess or whatever it is. I personally feel there is still time. It takes one letter. Yes, I know it's a matter of pride, but keep the pride aside for now. Let's meet the basics, the general people. And like I said, for LDC graduation, when the exporters are complaining, I don't think any of their SMEs are prepared. The government itself has not done anything since 2021 of the formation of that LDC graduation committee. They have not taken any action. You need serious cooperation from the National Board of Revenue. They're not prepared to graduate. When the government's own organizations are not prepared, how do you expect the businesses to be prepared? And finally, to do a post-mortem on this budget, we had no problem declaring a 10-day holiday, but we were only given 7 days to it. And then Monday will do. So there was not much discussion going on. People are asking, why are you not raising your voices? We are raising our voices. Government is listening. It's listening. That's where it stops. It listens. And then it stops. There's no further action on it. Just one point of the black money wiping scheme was put away. Okay. Makes no impact on the national budget. The last one. I've already taken too much of the time. In 2022, 2023, post-COVID, actually post-COVID, majority of the businesses haven't come back to its original trend of pre-2020. Majority of the businesses. Everyone has reduced their costs. For example, I have 3 PLCs. We haven't declared dividends in the last 2 years. During COVID, we have, but we have been using our retained earnings, but now we are facing the aftermath of the effect. We've been reducing our costs, administrative costs, even salaries, paying everyone, but obviously not. The government has increased its expenditure, public expenditure, by 23% in 1 year and 21%, 23 and 24. Public expenditure majority goes into the salaries. That was done by the previous government, forget about it. Even in this year, nearly 8.5% or more than 8.5%, public expenditure has gone up. Yes, they have sacrificed on the ADP. We don't need the ADP budget anymore. We have done enough mega beautiful projects to show which now the government is paying for. Okay, understood. But why are we constantly increasing public expenditure? Public expenditure can be reduced. Every single business is reducing public expenditure. Why can't the government do it? It's very simple. You can take 1 to 2% of that expenses and nothing's going to change. These things have not been addressed, and I don't see, because we always feel if this government can do it, we don't know who can. No. I usually had the privilege of doing all these postmortems for the last 5-6 years with another gentleman next to me in front of a television or all your events. But that gentleman happens to be the governor now. So I miss him. I don't see him in all these events. So I believe that whenever we have these sorts of events, I'm sure you eventually make a paper out of the discussions and all of that. But those are also sent to the government. We, the private sector, also do that. But they just don't seem to act on it. How they're going to act on it, and you do provide solutions. PRI does, and various think tanks, everyone, all these chambers and associations. But acting on those solutions is something the government has an itch. And then when we are trying to portray what the shortfalls are, we are not your enemy. We want you to succeed. Because at the end of the day, we are not politicians. We are not party people. We are not going to run away after 5 years. We are private sector. We are here for life. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very, some very provocative suggestions, but fully, we can agree with almost all you said, with some reservations, of course, but in general, you've hit the nail on the head. Okay, so that concludes our panel discussion. I think we're always, running short of time, but I would still like to invite a few questions before I pass it on to our special guest. So anybody raise your hands? Okay, please introduce yourself and ask a very short question. That would be helpful.
Well, I'm Mahfuz. My full name is Mahfuzul Chaudhry. I'm from Daily English newspaper, The Change. I'm working there as executive secretary to Chairman. Okay, I have 2 pieces of question, and I'm trying my best to make it very brief. Number one, we have seen in many countries, even some countries which are adjacent to Bangladesh, that there are certain barriers which are legally imposed on loan defaulters. Okay, like in China, in Vietnam, we have come to know, we have seen I have seen in newspapers that loan scammers or loan defaulters, they are not allowed to ride business class of when they buy yacht tickets. Okay, they are not allowed to ride business class in Vietnam, in China, and even in some countries in South America. Okay, but in our country, as far as I know, there are no such impositions on loan defaulters to subject them to some sort of social embarrassment, so that they feel compelled to pay back their loans. This is number one. Number two, in our newspaper, we wrote a broad number of articles, even during the previous regime, that the central bank, why the central bank does not expose the full list with the names and particulars of top loan borrowers. But even after the regime change, it has been 10 months, still the central bank did not comply with requests from different newspapers and media platforms to expose the full list of top loan borrowers. Okay, because it is known to everyone that most of the defaulted loans, those were actually laundered to foreign countries. Okay, so these two queries. Thank you very much for giving me floor.
Thank you. Okay, that's a good question. Any other raised hand? Okay, please introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Faisal Khan. I'm representing Leather Goods and Footwear Manufacturer Exporter Association of Bangladesh. My first, I would like to congratulate you and Dr. Ashik for your nice presentation. My first question is, in your presentation, you have mentioned that looking at our previous trends of economic growth, we can say that 5.5% GDP growth in next fiscal year is quite achievable. But in the presentation slide, it has been mentioned that it is unrealistic. So I would like to know what is your final position regarding this. And another issue is the 5 sectors which has been highlighted in your presentation, non-RMG sectors. We have seen that every sector is growing negatively. So we really would like to ask your suggestions how these sectors could be turned around. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any more hands? Can I ask you?
Asif Haidar, Research Associate from Business Initiative Leading Development. As Sir has already mentioned about the problem, so we have been listening about this problem for a long time, but no meaningful reforms have been take place. The government has recently announced 8th August as a new Bangladesh Day. So to make this day meaningful, to make our reforms meaningful, I think our bureaucrats and politicians and business entities all should prioritize a Bangladesh first policy so that we can actually get a meaningful Bangladesh. And regarding the NPL issue, I have analyzing the data, I have seen that during 2011, the NPL was 22,000 crore Bangladeshi taka. But on the next year, it jumped to 52,000 crore taka. Why? Because in 2011, the 15th Amendment of the Constitution took place, which abolished the caretaker government system. I don't know whether it's the sole reason for the rising that NPL or not, but it might be. I'm not sure of that, but I suspect it to be one of the great reasons. And one thing I came to learn from the bankers that they mentioned that Bangladesh Bank always encourages us to disburse the loan, but they don't give us any instruction to give any advertisement about the punitive measures regarding loan defaulters. So if this can be manipulated, it would be a great initiative. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Dr. Sattar, please.
Thank you. Okay, please. Yeah, this would be the last question from a very senior journalist.
We want to refer to statement of deliberation of Dr. Ashikur Rahman.
আচ্ছা
উনি এখানে বলেছেন যে 6 লক্ষ কোটি টাকার এনপিএল দাঁড়াতে পারে।
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা
বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক বলেছে। এখন শেষ তথ্য হবে এই 6 লক্ষ কোটি টাকা will it ever be realized or is it too late?
That's $1 million question, whether you'll waive a 6 lakh crore taka NPL. So how do you recover that? Right? That's a good question. But I'm sure there's the provisioning, tremendous provisioning shortfall, I'd say. So that will definitely be a problem. So with that, I think if I could close the Q&A session and pass on to our special guest first, His Excellency Clinton Popke, Deputy Head of Mission of Australia High Commission. So it's your floor.
Well, thank you very much. Wow, what a fantastic discussion it's been today. I just want to recognize the chief guests, the chairman, as well as my esteemed panelists today. As a bona fide economics nerd, I'm always very excited for some old-fashioned macroeconomic analysis and budget analysis. And any meeting that includes a quote from Joseph Stiglitz is a good meeting. So this has really been a fantastic discussion. And I'm also very honored to be here at the second monthly macroeconomic insight hosted by PRI. The first one I spoke a little bit, I guess, around where it's, the importance, I suppose, of think tanks into supporting public economic debate, policy debate. It's not really my place, I guess, to comment on the macroeconomics or the budget. I'll leave that to the experts, the local experts. But I did want to reflect briefly, I guess, on why I think this kind of analysis and public engagement is so vital for good governance and vital for democracy, and why Australia is so thrilled to be able to support PRI's work in this space. And bluntly, it's because I'll focus on the budget for this one. And bluntly, it's because the country's budget is the ultimate expression of the government's responsibility to the people to allocate resources. So political leaders in all countries can say lots of different things to lots of different audiences. But when the budget drops, the hard decisions are locked in on paper for everyone to see and everyone to scrutinise. And it's the ultimate moment where a government of the day, or where the people can see if the government of the day is putting its money where its mouth is. And that, of course, includes portfolio allocations, policy priorities, revenue targets, and fiscal policy, fiscal management more generally. Likewise, it represents the marching orders for the public service, outlining the commitments that they must deliver upon, and which they are compelled to then report back to their supreme order institutions at the end of the budget cycle to see whether they did so or not. But all of this wonderful transparency and accountability and good governance only works if the people understand actually what's in the budget. And this requires a few other pieces to happen. One is you've got to have the public appetite to engage. As far as I can tell from 18 months here in Bangladesh, the political engagement in Bangladesh is extremely good. It appears to be a nation full of economists. And so I'm very confident that this condition has been met.
Here.
Even the rickshaw driver is going to have an economic opinion about the policy direction of the country. Second, you've got to have a government that has the fortitude to be receptive to public debate and receptive to criticism. I think the presence here today of the Honourable Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor is a testament to that fortitude of the interim government. And I think their approach, their deeply consultative approach to date is also a testament to that. Lastly, you need really smart people doing first-rate analysis, thinking deeply about how to communicate their insights and establish forums to present their thinking and to further the public debate. And this is the terrific work of PRI here today, as well as Bangladesh's rich think tank ecosystem and rich academic tradition. So, with this delivering on these pieces is also a work in progress in my country, in Australia, where the federal budget is now something of an event, particularly in Canberra, where I live. We have the media lockups and the lead into the budget. You have all the policy, like myself, I kid you not, we have budget parties where we go down to the local pub and we analyse the budget speech together. But also, our own federal budget was recently released, delivered by our Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, in March. And in addition to the rigorous scrutiny that come along with this from the media and from think tanks and NGOs, I was very pleased to see the efforts of my own government to try and effectively communicate this budget. This included, a suite of publicly accessible documents, interactive tools, explanatory materials, even down to budget calculators that help people work out what the tax or transfer implications were for them of new budget measures. Likewise, here in Bangladesh, the role and the work, incredible work really, of organisations like PRI is absolutely vital. And we're really proud to support their work here today to provide this analytical depth and independent scrutiny to the budget, utilising the tremendous expertise that Bangladesh has here in order to build a resilient and accountable government. And really, I'm just completely blown away both by the quality of the analysis, the insightful comments of my fellow panelists here, the calibre of the questions, and just the discussion more generally. So it's been a real privilege, and I've learned a lot today, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for coming. So there is at least one similarity between Australia and Bangladesh. The budget gets a lot of attention. That's
But
right.
isn't United States also looking at it coming July 4th, the big budget thing?
Well, I don't want to comment.
Okay, before I pass on to the baton to our chief guest, I think it would be good to give a few responses to the points raised by our private sector colleagues. Therefore, after the chief guest has spoken, I think we should not speak. So that should be a better policy. So I mean, before I hand it over to you, sir, I will just respond to a couple of points because it's important. Madam Ferdowsa raised this issue of toy industry, and this is one industry actually. Long time we've been saying Bangladesh has a strong comparative advantage in this sector, and we all know that this is the toy export sector. It's $300 billion strong, and 70% of toys were being exported by China. And the US was one of the biggest market for that. And that, there's been some redirection of orders for toys. And as a result, Bangladesh was exporting toys to the US, which was growing at an annual rate of 30-40%.
Very interesting for me.
Yeah.
When I have seen these statistics that.
Now, let me come to a policy issue that is not very helpful. What happened in this budget is they have this very, I would call this a caricature. They have this tariff values and minimum import prices. Thankfully, I think tariff values are finally good. But they still have this minimum import values. What they do is they set some minimum import prices. And I tell you, this is a
minimum import prices withdrawn.
No, it has not been withdrawn. They have added new minimum import values for 23 products that includes toys. But you can imagine, what do you mean by a minimum import value for chocolates, for cosmetics, and for toys? Toys, you have toys worth 100 taka and you have toys worth several thousand taka. So how do you set a minimum price? And they've not only set minimum prices, but they have increased the minimum price for these 23 products, including toys, from 14% increase to 150% increase. And raising the minimum price by 150% means raising the tariff by 150%. Okay, even if the tariff USTR has pointed out that our tariffs are very high. And for most of the consumer goods, we've got this average tariff, which is at 45% for consumer goods. Average, but the actual, the total trade, the total taxes above 60% for consumer goods. So I think this is a bad judgment to set minimum import prices for chocolates, cosmetics, and toys as well. This discourages export of toys because what I talk about is anti-export bias of this policy. If you raise the tariff on toys, you will redirect toy sales from exports to domestic market. And that's not good at this time when the potential for toy exports is tremendous. So that is one point I wanted to respond to. Second, AJ, Mr. Rahman Rizwan Rahman ji point out question. AJ, SMEs, CM and SMEs, but this is a real problem because আমাদের যেসব regulatory licensing, what you need, the small and medium enterprise, the small enterprises, they are hurt because they don't have access to these government offices. And you have mentioned that the official rate might be 200 taka, but you actually spend probably 10 times that. The small ones probably have to do even more. So the existing regulatory policies are so badly handled that the small ones really get hurt. And this is where the small enterprises...
ACMSME, a framework থেকে বের হতে হবে. You're right. যে কটেজ এন্ড মাইক্রোকে আলাদা করতে হবে
এখন
and
CMS.
সিএমএস কে আলাদা করতে হবে
Too large.
হ্যাঁ এবং এম এন্ড এল কে আপনি আলাদা করতে হবে
কিন্তু আবার
Okay.
ফর্মাল অ্যাড হয়েছে
So,
ICMS
this can be done beyond the budget. So I think if we all agree that some change has to be done, it can be done outside the budget. Would you like to respond to that question about
আমি
6 lakh taka, 6 lakh crore taka
দেশে যে
NPL?
6 লাখ crore টাকা এনপিএল বা যে ব্ল্যাক হোল ইন দ্য ব্যাংকিং সেক্টর আছে
Mhm.
this is not the first time a country is seeing such a scenario. Bangladesh, internationally, there are ways out of these kind of problem. Many countries have faced debt problems. Many countries have faced financial problems. There is a clear roadmap. আমরা সেই রোডম্যাপের দিকে যাচ্ছি there is a good sign that
Mhm.
for the first time বাংলাদেশে একটা স্ট্রং ব্যাংকিং রেজলিউশন অ্যাক্ট হয়েছে এবং এই রেজলিউশন অ্যাক্টে যেটা অ্যাচিভ হয়েছে আগে 2008 the lesson from 2008 is that we need to correct the moral hazard problem of the too big to fail, right? So after 2008 there was a realization that bankers, equity owners of big banks must pay for their bad decisions, the excessive risk-taking decisions or corruption, right? And for that, the idea was that we save the bank, but not the owner. We save banks, but not the owner. And that is the fundamental principle of Banking Resolution Act, which the ordinance was passed. So the legal framework is now there. Now the legal framework is there. Now the political will must be there to push hard with the mergers. And that is where the ball will become bouncy, the Yorkers will fall on your toe, and that is where all the protests will come, because there will, no matter what Bangladesh Bank says, unemployment in the banking sector will happen. When you merge 11 banks and you try to create 1 or 2 banks, resistance will rise, but that is where you have to show bold courage, because without consolidating banks into few banks, you cannot address this problem. And that is where the music becomes
So
very
do you
difficult.
think we have to wait for a political government, or the interim government can?
The interim government should definitely start.
But no, this is a long-term process. It's just,
Yeah.
no,
It-
one should put a time frame on it.
Exactly. It should start.
It's a resolution.
Exactly.
process. And even in the resolution process, there are areas, because some of those banks are totally bankrupt.
Absolutely.
They have eaten up all their capital.
93%.
And where is the space from where, even within that, how do you do that?
How do you do
So those are things that has to be handled. So,
It should start.
yeah, but
The legal framework
there
is,
has to be this resolution.
হয়েছে অলরেডি এখন এটাকে কন্টিনিউ
now the legal framework.
Excellent. I think we had a very rich discussion, very rich exchanges, and everything went very well. And I think I now have the pleasure and the privilege to invite our chief guest, Dr. Sheik Moinuddin, who is an engineer by profession, a PhD in engineering from California University. And he has been running, at the top level, California Transport for Caltran, and also this big project, the speed train project from Los Angeles to Francisco. I think that's Moinuddin the opportunity to give his native country some, service, and that's why we have, benefited from his, coming to Bangladesh. So may I now invite Dr. Moinuddin to share his perspectives, his insights on the sector that has been given to him as a responsibility, roads and highways division. That's a big sector. Dr. Moinuddin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Sattar, for inviting me and for a glowing introduction. And thank you, distinguished guest and media.
কাজ করছে না, but
Well,
শোনা যাবে সব।
yeah, that's fine. Basically, this is the economic forum, and my profession is engineering. So how much do I know about economics, right? But one thing is to get the economy to where it's supposed to be, or in a flourishing economy, there is always few industries has to work together to get that economy to that level, right? And that's one of the major industry is road transport industries. And that's where I come into picture. I don't think I have to reinvent the wheel, because you are all economists here, that road transport, it's not just road transport, basically transportation industry plays a major role in economic development. That has happened through years from our early civilization to all the way to this date, right? And just to give you a figure, from Daily Star, I learned that because of Bangladesh's inadequate transportation sector, there is a GDP hit of 1.5%. I don't know exactly what year was it, but basically that was I'm citing it from Daily Star, 1.5% GDP hit because of our inadequate transport infrastructure. But why is it important? Because obviously, if you don't have the right transport, it increases. Your transport time. It increases accidents. It increases. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Yeah. You already know about that. But the main thing is, now this is a sector actually I'm dealing with in US, and frankly speaking, this is a lot more complicated than what I have been dealing with in US. And there, the sector is a lot bigger than Bangladesh. Okay, Bangladesh is a lot more complicated. Now, why? I'm not going to get into the funding issue. There is always shortfall, and everybody will say that in every sector there, so much money you need, but obviously that so much money you can get, right? But what I'm saying is the money that's been spent or that's been allocated is probably could have been organized better, or could have been dealt with in a better way.
Much more utilized.
Much more better utilized. Now, how do you do this? I'm here not even 3 months yet. What I'm seeing is missing is a comprehensive transportation plan that geared towards economic development. We have lots of roads, bridges, you name it, elevated expressways and what have you. But I don't see a connection that it is actually geared towards the economic development of the country, right? So we need to have a infrastructure plan that actually deals with all of our roads, railways, navigable waterways, or what have you. But the goal should be economic development. Now, but why are we not having this? The main problem is we are very fragmented. In not just only US, I have dealt with some of the European countries too. Their transportation is all under one roof, from planning to designing to operations. Everything is under one roof. Here, planning is a different ministry, railway is a different ministry, waterways is a different ministry. They all have their competing priorities, and they're working within their own silos. We are not really coordinating. Okay, so this is where we. And this is going to be my suggestion to our Dr. Mohammad Yunus, our chief. So that these sectors has to be under one roof, so that we can set our own priorities, we can plan for the future, and we can execute that. And as far as another thing is the hindrance for us right now. If you look at it, our procurement process or the entire process, even World Bank came to me, they said that Bangladesh has the longest procurement process as they know it, right? If you look at it from the DPP approval to by the time some of the projects, the DPP approval, when the project starts, you're looking at least 4 to 5 years within the time frame. So the DPP, if the DPP is approved, and by the time it goes to construction, 4 to 5 years, a lot of things can change, including exchange rate, right? So if it started off at 5,000 crore, by the time it goes to construction, it's probably 8,000 crore. So when you're looking at 8,000 crore, that means we could have taken some other projects, which basically what we missed out, right? So that's why it needs to be a comprehensive solution, needs to be under one ministry. That way we probably can get more for the buck, right? And just to give you another example, and I was talking to Dr. Sattar about that too. The congestions that we are having, especially let's say in Dhaka, right? I'm actually dealing with right now. We actually took one of the roadway as a pilot project to kind of see how the congestion can be reduced in one place on one roadway, and then we can mimic that to the rest of the Dhaka. I have Dhaka City Corporation North involved, Dhaka City Corporation South involved. We have Dhaka Metropolitan Police involved, Roads and Highways involved, WASA involved, Power Development Board involved. It's becoming a huge issue. Oh, and then don't forget about the Bas Malik Shamiti and then three-wheelers, right? So, anyway, I don't want to play the same. I mean, what they call play the same music over and over again. So we need to have some changes within our policy to basically make this thing happen. But anyway, we're here for short term. What I'm planning to do is at least maybe we can just set the things right, and when the next government comes in, hopefully they will pick it up and move with that. With that being said, today I'm having a meeting with ADB. They're coming up with a proposal to have a economic corridor that's basically from Teknaf all the way to from Tetulia to Teknaf. Yeah. And what they're saying to the economic corridor to promote business, not just within Bangladesh, but taking into consideration Nepal, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, our neighboring countries, right? And but obviously what they're missing is they're just looking at just that corridor, but I'm working with our expert to actually expand that to bringing in other Jela and Upper Jela, basically the other parts of the Bangladesh, to kind of see the rise of that economic development too. So it's not just going to be that corridor, but we are actually using other feeder corridors to come into that corridor. So hopefully when I leave, I can leave a good map that when the next government comes in, rather than just coming in and say, I need a road from here to there. I mean, I need this service from here to there. They're at least looking at that and just take one step at a time and take one at a time. But under that map, which is going to be geared towards more economic development. So we are actually working feverishly on this. Hopefully, before we leave, I will have that
Why you will leave?
completed.
I think it needs time.
So with that,
maybe the next government will like it to continue.
So with that, if there is any questions before I leave.
তো এই চারটা মন্ত্রণালয় আপনি যেটা বলছেন যে এদের ভিতরে কি কোনো কোঅর্ডিনেশন নেই, নৌ পরিবহন, রেলওয়ে, যোগাযোগ, do a overall communication map of Bangladesh?
Okay, let me give you an example. When I came in, I see that there is a study done by Bridges Division. There is a study done by Roads and Highways Division
Within the same ministry.
within the same ministry. Then I found out there is another a study done by Railway. My question is, no, that's all should be done concurrently.
So all studies focusing on the same thing,
No,
separately done.
they are focusing on theirs.
Acha.
Okay, Railway Ministry is looking at next 10, 15 years.
Our
plan.
master plan.
Yeah, their master plan.
Okay.
BBA is looking at their master plan, right? And my thing is BBA, when we build bridges, it has to connect some roadway. I went to Khulna. I see that roads and highways, the bridge is there, but the roadway connecting to the bridge, that's under LGRDs. That's not done. Bridge is there for last 2 years. The LGRD, they don't have.
Bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, basically their priorities is not there. This is what I'm trying to basically accomplish, that we need to have a master plan. If we see the Bangladesh in the next year economically.
So the master plan for transportation sector for the whole country, that doesn't exist at this time.
No, it does exist, but in a different segments. It's not a
Fragmented way, fragmented and contradictory
It
way.
is not truly multimodal.
no.
What does that mean? That means it interacts. This road will interact with the river, with the rail. So and it's a lot of times what you find, because this is something, doesn't it impact that railway is going and parallel you have the road. So you have the trucks and you want to put a container doesn't go because trucks go faster. Because so you immediately you put this is all along. You see the railway always parallel to
And
highway that
civil
is.
aviation.
Bangladesh
Yes.
Civil aviation.
Model Transport Policy 2013 আছে দেখেছেন তো
Yep, I've seen that,
হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ।
but that's not geared towards economic development. Rather than it's not.
Social
We need to basically drive that economy, right? You need to bring in the bridges, roadways, or multimodal facilities to different parts of the countries so that they basically grow economically, so that they have a chance to bringing in their products to either the port facility or the civil aviation or the road thing, all that. But I haven't seen that.
আপনাদের US এর example there is only one transport secretary. সেখানে তো রেলওয়ে মন্ত্রী, বিমান মন্ত্রী, নৌ মন্ত্রী, এত তো মন্ত্রণালয় নেই।
Sir, I have one question. You said master plan. So in the last 53 years, various times there have been political government. So one government has one sort of a vision, right? So the vision is usually tied to whether a political party or an individual or something. It has happened over the last 53 years, all the time. So today I have made a master plan, a 10-year plan, and this is my vision. But tomorrow Ashik takes over the government. Rizwan made this plan. It can be a good plan. Then Clinton takes over. Oh, come on, what do these boys know? So how is Bangladesh ever going to, I'm asking you specifically, you don't represent a political party, you are not here, you're not a part of the bureaucracy, you're completely external, and you've come here and you've seen all this. How would you make a master plan that nobody else will interrupt?
Okay, so this is what I'm hoping, that we are not political party, right? So when we plan something or when we come up with a plan, we're hoping the next political party will not see it as being devised by a different political party. They'll probably see that somebody neutral who created this plan, who does not have any political
Affiliation.
applications and what have you.
Moinuddin Bridge tomorrow, it's going to be broken down, right? Because that's what happened in the past. So that's.
Names are changed, bridges are not broken.
Has that changed?
Names are changed.
Names changing, but
Yeah, hopefully.
Bridges won't be broken.
it's still happening today under your government.
Yes.
I think you have seen the
This naming,
Phoenix policy 2024.
This bridge is not owned by an individual.
Logistics.
It belongs to me. It belongs to all these people in this room. I'm sorry, but there are various prime ministers, various presidents, various dignitaries, but you don't own them. We do. The people do. What's in a name? So this is one of the primary problems. Oh, this is that airport. This is that bridge. Okay, it has to be shut down. We have to change the name. But don't issue such a name that's going to be questioned. No, that's one thing. But again, the master plan. We have made a 100-year Delta plan. Initially, it was a good plan. I would like to see the incoming governments. I work in waterways infrastructure, that they take this on. There needs to be some corrections, of course, but dumping it puts us back another 10 years, 15 years. No? Some policies can be worked around. Some of the government ministers are considering, oh, let's break down this project regardless of how much we have spent because it has no economic impact. Okay, if there's no economic impact, don't continue with the project. But just because it's done by a previous government, at the end of the day, we are the taxpayers who pay for the project. We're the ones bearing the cost. Our name is neither on that bridge, neither was our vision for a plan. So as an individual, completely with an external view, we want to see not only you, your entire government, but whatever plan you make, no one else is going to come and say, oh, this is Dr. Moinuddin's plan. That's Dr. Muhammad Yunus's vision. We don't want that. I want my own vision. So is it possible maybe talk to them beforehand?
Yeah. No, none of this plan will have my name in it. So people are going to say, I know. But what I'm trying to say is, okay, first of all, the field I came from, right? So I do have a long history. Basically, I worked in infrastructure development, operations, maintenance, and what have you, right? So this is my cup of tea. So what I'm trying to mimic basically how the Western world basically for their infrastructure development, right? And they're all under one roof. Even in US too, roads and bridges, they are named after somebody else. There are a whole bunch of bridges names.
Also sponsors.
And sponsors too. But the thing is, at least they are done right. I don't care about who names it. And usually over there, they pay for it to at least the part of the things is coming from them. So they sponsor it, so they put their name on it. But that doesn't mean that that bridges is going nowhere. No, it comes under a plan, right? Somebody pays for it, that's fine. Okay, as long as you pay for it, you put your name there. So that's basically my plan is whether it will be changed. that's not up to me anymore.
Okay, yeah. So
the people
naming, hey, yeah.
গ্লোবাল যে চারটা মন্ত্রণালয় এগুলোকে এক করার ব্যাপারে আপনার কোনো ইয়া থাকবে? অনেক ধরনের সংস্কার উদ্যোগ নিচ্ছে সরকার। এই যে ব্যবসায়ীরাও বলছেন যে আমরা ঋণ করে এখন বেতন দিতে হচ্ছে। তো এই যে মন্ত্রণালয় একের পরে রেল মন্ত্রণালয়, সড়ক মন্ত্রণালয়, নৌ পরিবহন, আর আলাদা মন্ত্রণালয়, আলাদা লোকজন, এইগুলোকে এক করে খরচ কমানো, সরকারের খরচ কমানোর জন্য আপনারা কোনো উদ্যোগ নেবেন? বিভিন্ন ধরনের সংস্কার উদ্যোগ তো নেওয়া হচ্ছে।
It's a good question. Only thing is, it's a pretty long process, and I mean, I'm not too sure whether we'll be able to do that. But then I'm just a part of one mantranala, right? But I guess this is what probably our media should kind of help us out, right? If it is in the media, it probably the public perception changes, and they probably want to see that changes too. It needs to be done, and I have been advocating. So obviously, it all depends because this is a major task. So I'm not too sure whether this government will actually work on it, because it will take time. It will take some time, but the plan should be there so that we work together to kind of bring it under one umbrella. Just to give an example, Dhaka City, the congestion, right? That's a BUET assessment. Just the congestion itself. It cost 37,000 crore annually, and west of 5 million
Hours.
hours. Now, 37,000 crore annually, we can have two MRT lines every year. But the problem is, this is intangible. You can't see it.
Mhm.
If it was tangible, we would have seen it.
Mhm.
আরেকটা
Well, that's-
ইনফরমেশন আমি আপনাকে একটু দিই, সেটা হচ্ছে ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার সেক্টরের 89 policies আছে, policies and acts. There is a list in the logistics policy 2020
89 policies and acts.
are required for the infrastructure sector. There is a list included in the policy.
I have read few of them. I didn't get to do all 89 of them yet.
No, but I think the list is huge.
I know.
That's why for taking any licenses, certificates, etc., etc. So much time requires.
Uh,
It is.
But you can have a look to the logistics policy 2024.
Logistics policy.
But just to
It has got some information.
I've seen it. I just,
লাস্টের দিকে করলো
Master plan,
যেটা
that's issues are included in this policy.
Acha, acha.
মাসুর ভাইরা ছিল মনে হয় তার সাথে
আমরা PMO
আপনার
সাথে
বিয়ে
করেছিলাম।
পিএমও
I think I've seen it, but I haven't.
You haven't seen?
No, I've seen it, but I didn't get a chance to read it.
গতকাল একটা মিটিং ছিল, প্রিন্সিপাল সেক্রেটারি চেয়ার করেছিলেন, আমরা ছিলাম। ফার্স্ট ন্যাশনাল লজিস্টিক্স ডেভেলপমেন্ট কোঅর্ডিনেশন
With the logistics department, roads and highways division and representative ছিল ওখানে? Secretary, acha,
He raised several points.
acha, acha.
The multimodal transport policy যেটা 2013 হয়েছিল, ওইটা যে হয়েছে সেটাই কেউ জানতো না।
Acha.
যখন পলিসিটা করতে গেলাম তখন খুঁজে দেখা গেল এরকম একটা পলিসি আছে।
The thing is, this policy should be headed by transportation specialist. That's what we are lacking.
বাংলাদেশে প্রচুর পলিসি আছে, অ্যাক্টস আছে, রেগুলেশনস আছে, কোনো অভাব নেই।
I think
আজকে হ্যাঁ
yeah, I think
yeah আজকে we have done very good in terms of timing. So we are supposed to end at 1:30 and you know I already made my closing remarks.
8 minutes of austerity savings.
So with that we conclude, but we also, what is the luncheon story? Is it
How did
we have lunch bags?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you are all welcome to, you know, this lunch bags that will be available as you leave.
Thank you for coming.
আমি ভেবেছিলাম
Thank you.
আমরা বসি, we can have lunch together.
ইন্টারেস্টিং ছিল আলোচনাটা।